Scott.
Took me a while to figure this one out, so it's nothing super complicated in theory, but we've got a simple writing desk here. It's going to have 3 drawers, fairly low profile, and then the legs are going to have a 3-degree splay. So instead of being perfectly square, they're splayed out this way a little bit, and they will also be a compound splay, so they'll go forwards in the front and lean backwards in the back. This desk is going to be made out of walnut. In this case, this stuff was supplied by the person I'm building it for. They had a bunch of walnut and wanted me to build them a desk and a coffee table. Coffee table's coming along, but this right here is what we're going to be building our desk out of. So the next step is to rough cut most of the parts. I'm not going to cut everything at first. I'm going to rough cut enough for the base. I think the top will probably come along a little bit later because the base will take a fair amount of work. And then we'll talk about doing some of the drawer components later on. Best way to sharpen a pencil in a wood shop. The thing that I'm trying to think about very consciously before I start milling this on this aircraft carrier of a jointer is how things are going to show up in the overall project. So things like, you'll notice that there's some pretty significant grain curvature here. We're close to the center of the tree. This board actually has the center of the tree in it. This is some of my stock for the legs underneath here. It's going to get cut down, and I'm actually going to have to glue 2 boards together to get the thickness that I'm looking for my legs. Normally, I would just get a thicker piece of lumber, but because of the thickness of the lumber that I was given for this project, it came from somebody. They had picked out the lumber. I'm going to be very, very careful in how I go through this. So these are down here are going to be the main top of the desk. I'm trying to get a good inch out of it, make it nice and beefy. And then some of the leg stock as well is what I'm going to be milling today on our jointer. Okay, so first thing that I will say about this stack of lumber is this project is going to take a lot of milling. This stuff is twisted as all get out. Every single board had a crazy twist to it, and what you can see as a result is this right here. So notice the thickness difference between this side and this side. We're gonna probably mill these a little bit more today. We're also gonna do some edge jointing and cut these to width so that we can glue up this top here and then get working on our legs. So I've got my top ready for marking out for glue up. One of the really important things about creating a panel, which is 2 or more boards glued together, is to pay attention to appearance, but also grain direction. So these boards are not exactly ideal. If I had a choice, I would pick something else, but somebody provided me with this wood, and so I'm doing the best that I can with it. So this board right here actually has the center of the tree. Typically you want to try to avoid this because this can cause warping or cracking, but we're going to do our best to stabilize this. But what this means is that this centerpiece is probably going to have the most movement, which is why I'm putting it in the middle of my panel. That way it can be most supported by the frame going underneath this. Now with a panel, if you look at the grain direction, notice how this one is facing down and this one is facing up. When you do a panel, you want to try to alternate grain direction so that instead when instead of getting a panel that could potentially bow and kind of look like a Pringle, because all of the grain is facing the same direction, it will all bow in the same direction. You flip your grain direction back and forth so that instead of being one giant bow, if it does decide to bow, it'll be a little more of a wave, which granted isn't ideal, but it still gives you a flat panel overall, because you might have high and low points, but overall the whole top isn't going to be a giant curve. To put this panel together, and in order to align my boards so that they will be flush across the surface, I'm going to use a pretty common tool for panel making that is called a biscuit jointer. Biscuit jointer does a pretty simple task where it has a small saw blade that is going to cut us a little oval shape, and then a biscuit is just this little oval of wood that goes in between here and aligns the board vertically so that these faces end up flush after a glue up. Top is glued up. If you notice here, I've got alternating clamps because the force is being applied up from the main point of strength. What's going to happen is those clamps are going to want to make these boards bow up. So if you alternate the clamps, you balance out the force, so you make sure that your panel comes out glued up nice and flat. Ready for glue up number 2. So I've got my stock for my legs ripped down. I've gone ahead and just tried to match up color wise and just the way that I like the grain pattern showing, trying to get as little of the sapwood showing on our faces, just getting the most consistent color on our legs that when you look at it, you kind of won't notice that they're glued together. Alright, so we're over at the table saw. This is our original plan, just to give you guys a reminder of the shape of the desk that we're doing. Pretty simple shaker style desk with splayed legs. So what I've got here are drawer parts. I don't have the bottoms cut yet. Drawer faces and our aprons. So the drawer faces are thicker because we're going to be doing some dovetails in those, and also we're going to be adding a little bit of an angle to match the splay of our legs. This is where we start going from the rough dimensions column into our finished dimensions column. So the only thing that I've used from this finished dimensions column so far is the thickness for our drawer sides and the aprons. These I left a little bit thicker because we have not cut the 3-degree angle on the face yet, but we're going to start cutting all of these to our final width. So I need to be very, very accurate on our table saw. Alright guys, I'm going to end part 1 of this desk build right here. A lot of this episode was just machining, cutting things to size, but what you saw in about 10 minutes here is probably 6 or 7 hours worth of work. So condense a lot of it down. Next episode, we're going to get into some more details, getting some parts put together, been working through that, trying to figure things out before I start filming. So right now, over here on this table, this is kind of where I'm at. You'll see me cut tapers on these legs, and also we're getting into some of our jointry, so cutting what's called mortise and tenon joints to put this thing together. So stay tuned for that next week, and thank you for watching.